The atmosphere inside the forward base was crushing. For weeks, the hills had been swallowing soldiers whole. Surprise attacks lurked everywhere. Men came back injured if they came back at all. Footsteps echoed across the wooden floor of the command tent, firm and purposeful. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres entered. She was small, reserved, unimpressive to look at. Nothing about her appearance suggested the kind of warrior that people spoke about in hushed voices after dark. Soldiers looked up from their planning tables. A group of Navy SEALs sat back in their seats, grinning, muttering quietly. "That's her? That's who everyone keeps mentioning?" Soft laughter rippled through the space. To their eyes, she was just another soldier, too thin, too quiet to be anything special. At the far side, General Marcus Steele stood tall, his uniform covered in medals, his voice famous for breaking recruits before they ever saw combat. He'd heard the stories too, but he put no faith in stories. He put faith in proof. And the silent woman before him didn't look like proof. The room grew uncomfortable. Doubt mixed with mockery. Murmurs spread like interference. "That's supposed to be the one they call something." The phrase hung there. The nickname remained unsaid. General Steele's expression hardened. He was traditional and he despised myths. Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you won't miss these real accounts of bravery. And share in the comments where you're watching from right now. General Marcus Steele had served in the military for more than 30 years. He could sense tension in a room the way a marksman senses distance. And what he noticed now troubled him. The instant Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked into the tent, everything changed. It wasn't her walk or her posture. It was how every soldier around her responded. The Marines went rigid, their talking stopping halfway through. Even the Navy SEALs, arrogant and unbreakable, fell quiet just long enough to notice her. That told Steele everything. He despised whispers. He despised rumors. And above all, he despised myths he couldn't verify. A myth made troops believe in miracles, and miracles got people killed. He stepped away from the planning table, boots hitting hard against the wooden surface. The tent fell completely silent. His eyes locked on Torres, icy and merciless. "You," he shouted, voice carrying total authority. "Come forward." Torres moved immediately. Every pair of eyes in the tent tracked her, curiosity weighing down like stones. She appeared smaller than most soldiers, thinner too, but something in her bearing, straight shoulders, unwavering gaze, absolutely refused to yield. "Identify yourself." Steele's voice was cutting, meant to slice through uncertainty like a knife. Torres replied steadily, tone level, no anxiety showing. "Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres, 1st Recon, sir." The response was perfectly sharp, precisely what he'd anticipated. But it left him unsatisfied. He'd heard the accounts coming back from combat. Tales of a soldier who never missed, who moved through danger invisible, who pulled entire teams back from certain death. It heated his blood. Troops should fear their opponents, not idolize their teammate. He moved closer, his shadow covering her features, his jaw clenched, the edge of his mouth curling into the smallest frown. "Insufficient," he said quietly. Yet every soldier in the tent caught it. "Your call sign." The impact was immediate. The room seemed to hold its breath. Marines looked at each other. A SEAL shifted position. Boots scraped against flooring. Rumors that had circulated for weeks suddenly crashed into this single moment of revelation. Everyone understood what was about to happen. Everyone wanted to witness it. And everyone feared it. Torres didn't react. She didn't fidget. Her expression stayed composed, almost distant, as though she'd rehearsed this confrontation countless times in her mind already. She raised her chin slightly, holding Steele's stare without any hint of uncertainty. Her tone was flat, calm, empty of pride or cockiness. "Spectre Six." The phrase sliced through the tent like steel through fabric. Silence descended, dense, oppressive, complete. For several seconds, even General Steele remained wordless. He'd encountered the call sign previously in documents that were marked classified and locked away. He'd dismissed it back then as inflation, troops creating stories to make sense of survival. But now, standing before him, the story had a body, a uniform, and eyes that wouldn't crack under scrutiny. Throughout the room, Marines stirred uncomfortably. SEALs straightened where they sat. The grins had vanished. The mockery had disappeared. All that lingered was the gravity of those two words. Spectre Six. And nobody questioned it anymore. The echo of her statement still filled the air like fog. Spectre Six. For one pulse, nobody stirred. The laughter that had trickled through the tent earlier had evaporated. The SEALs, warriors who had faced hell and considered themselves unshakable, sat motionless. One of them, the loudest presence in the rear, had been slouching casually in his seat moments before. Now he sat upright, palms resting on his thighs, his expression tense. Across the table, younger officers traded nervous looks. They'd seen pieces of the combat reports, the ones never intended to circulate beyond secure channels. Documents that described a soldier who disappeared into passageways in Kabul only to emerge behind enemy positions. A soldier who transformed desperate battles into decisive wins. But those files had always carried the same label, unconfirmed. Now the origin of those whispers stood in their space, breathing their air, and the reality of it settled heavily into every person present. General Steele's face didn't ease. If anything, it grew harder. He'd survived more campaigns than he wanted to remember, had watched heroes created and destroyed in a single evening. He didn't believe in stories, and he resented when troops built them around ordinary people. But the call sign had torn straight through his disbelief, because he'd encountered it before in classified communications, in briefings delivered behind locked doors, in whispers that made even experienced warriors speak more softly. Spectre Six. Steele echoed slowly, almost to himself. The phrase tasted bitter on his lips. The tent remained frozen. Marines who had quietly mocked her earlier shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet her eyes. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody murmured. They'd all sensed the abrupt transformation, the instant when speculation became reality. Torres remained still, her face calm, neither boastful nor guarded. She provided nothing additional. She had given her identity, and that was sufficient. One SEAL finally disrupted the silence. He muttered under his breath, not quite audible enough to reach the general, but loud enough for nearby soldiers. No surprise they survived. The statement spread like fire catching kindling. Soldiers recalled the operations gone wrong in Kabul when teams trapped under assault had somehow fought their way back without losing anyone. The accounts had always felt inflated, a method for Marines to reassure themselves after surviving chaos. But now those same warriors understood the heart of those accounts was standing directly before them. General Steele's eyes bore into her, probing for flaws, hunting for vulnerability. He found nothing. Behind that stare was controlled intensity. Not pride, not showmanship, but conviction. And for the first time in a lengthy career, Steele found himself disturbed. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was softer, yet it resonated more powerfully than any command. I hope, Sergeant, that reputation isn't just empty talk. Torres held his gaze without wavering. It's not so. The quiet returned, but this time it carried no mockery. It was honor, raw and substantial, the type that can't be forced, only gained. Weeks before that charged briefing, Kabul's streets had already carved her reputation. It was meant to be a standard patrol, narrow passages, dust lifting off crumbling stone, children staring from doorways with blank expressions. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres took the lead, her weapon ready, her awareness sharp. She distrusted the quiet. In Kabul, quiet was never harmless. The ambush closed without warning. The initial burst of gunfire erupted from the rooftops. destroying windows and flooding the passage with disorder. Marines scrambled for protection behind damaged walls and burned vehicles. Voices exploded through the radios. Someone's hit. We have casualty. Bullets struck stone mere inches from Torres's skull, covering her in debris. Her team was trapped, bleeding, caught in a killing field with nowhere to advance. Enemy shooters controlled every angle. Rooftops, side passages, concealed doorways. She flattened against the wreckage, pulse steady, focus narrowing. Fear swirled around her, but she refused to let it penetrate. She studied the chaos, noticed how the firing patterns crossed, spotted the tiny openings where they did. There, a vulnerable point, a route through if she was brave enough to crawl across shattered glass to reach it. Without speaking, Torres slipped from shelter. She dragged herself forward across rubble, crawling through dirt and blood, inches at a time. Rounds hissed so near she could sense the temperature snap past her face. Every motion was calculated, every inhale controlled. She slid into the darkness of a fallen wall, moved wide through the network of rear passages, and surfaced behind the first rooftop position. One pull of the trigger, accurate, controlled, and the danger was eliminated. Then another, and another. She flowed like vapor, never remaining anywhere long enough to be detected. A ghost weaving through Kabul's web of brick and dust. 12 enemy positions dropped in order, each shot calculated, each threat silenced before they realized she was near. Back in the killing ground, the Marines sensed the situation shift. Gunfire that had pinned them abruptly weakened. Shouts of panic echoed through enemy lines. Marines raised their heads, understanding they had space to act. "Advance," someone commanded. And for the first time that day, the team moved forward. When Torres returned to them, her weapon was still hot, her gear covered with dirt and perspiration. She remained silent. She didn't have to explain. Every soldier in that passage knew who had rescued them from disaster. Not one Marine was abandoned. Not even one. When the briefings came later, officers debated how it had occurred. Some claimed fortune, some claimed exaggeration. But the Marines who'd been present knew different. They began whispering her call sign in dining areas and during transport runs, sharing it from team to team. Spectre Six, the identity of the soldier who crawled through nightmare and delivered them all safely. The command tent remained heavy with the resonance of her call sign. Spectre Six. Soldiers who had dismissed her minutes before now wouldn't look at her. The silence wasn't merely absence of sound. It was deep respect and General Marcus Steele sensed it pressing on him like an approaching tempest. He leaned forward on the table, the charts beneath his knuckles wrinkling under the force, his attention fixed on Torres, intense and unforgiving. He'd watched reputations grow too quickly, soldiers crushed beneath the burden of identities they could never fulfill. Myths were risky. They made troops careless, persuaded them someone was unstoppable, and when that illusion broke, Marines perished. Finally he rose, boots striking as he eliminated the space between them. He halted just before her, eyes locked, voice slicing the atmosphere. "Do you grasp what you've just claimed, Sergeant?" Torres stood at attention, shoulders back, chin slightly raised. "Yes, sir." His jaw tightened. "Myths destroy people. Marines will demand you be indestructible. They'll assume you can't fail, and when you do, they'll collapse with you." The statement hung sharp, designed to pierce her confidence. Around the tent, soldiers shifted nervously. SEALs leaned closer in their positions. Nobody dared interrupt, but every person listened intently. Torres didn't flinch. Her breathing remained calm, her stare unwavering. She'd encountered fear disguised as caution before. She had existed under it every time rounds cracked past her helmet in Kabul's passages. When she responded, her voice was soft, yet carved from iron. "Then I won't fail, sir." The tent grew still once more, thicker than earlier. Even the distant generator seemed to fade. For an instant, General Steele stayed quiet. He examined her expression the way a commander examines landscape, searching for flaws, hidden breaks, indications of deception. But what faced him wasn't arrogance or false confidence. It was quiet certainty, the variety created under fire and refined by survival. One of the younger officers glanced at the general anxiously as if anticipating him to punish her for disrespect. Instead, Steele breathed out through his nostrils, slow and deliberate. "You believe it's that straightforward," he said, though the harshness in his tone had softened slightly. "You believe it's simply about not failing." Torres remained motionless. "I don't believe, sir. I'm certain. My Marines are breathing because I'm certain." The reply was direct, void of pride, yet it struck the room like thunder. The SEAL who had mocked earlier dropped his stare. A captain near the table pressed his mouth shut, suddenly conscious that the weight of the story had just been validated by truth. General Steele's face shifted almost invisibly. The doubt stayed, but underneath it something else appeared. Acknowledgement. Honor. Reluctant, yet undeniable. He stepped backward, his voice quieter now, yet reaching farther than before. "Very well, Spectre Six." Nobody stirred, nobody uttered a sound. The myth wasn't merely whispers anymore. In that tent, beneath the general's own gaze, it had been confirmed. Honor had transformed permanently. The quiet in the command tent hadn't lifted yet when the entrance flap burst open. A young officer rushed inside, a document gripped firmly under his arm, his complexion pale beneath the bright lighting. He set the papers before General Steele without speaking. Steele reviewed the brief, his expression tightening with each sentence. Then he raised his head, his eyes fixing on the room. "Recon Bravo has lost contact," he stated. His tone was steady, yet the seriousness dropped immediately into every chest. Final transmission was 20 minutes back, city outskirts. No communication, no activity, likely surrounded. A wave of tension rippled through the assembled soldiers and SEALs. Everyone recognized what that indicated. A silent team in Kabul's outskirts wasn't merely missing. It was encircled. Steele's attention shifted purposefully to Torres. He didn't elevate his voice. He had no need. "Sergeant Torres, you'll take lead." The declaration dropped like an anvil. A few SEALs exchanged rapid glances, their previous mockery replaced with concern. They'd heard whispers, watched her stand face to face with the general without backing down. But this was different. This wasn't speculation or conference room posturing. This was a challenge written in casualties and danger. Torres didn't pause. Yes, she adjusted her weapon strap, moving forward with the calm efficiency of someone preparing for another difficult mission. Around her, boots scraped and weapons clicked as soldiers and SEALs assembled into formation. Uncertainty remained in their expressions, but so did something else, curiosity that approached respect. Outside, the Kabul night pulsed with tension. The city hummed distantly, but the outskirts were darker, quieter, where threats hid behind every damaged structure. The vehicles moved out under dim lighting, tires grinding gravel, engines muted to prevent detection. Inside the armored transport, silence reigned. Torres sat beside the entrance, helmet angled slightly forward, eyes shut for an instant of stillness. To others it appeared like composure. To her it was preparation. The structure of enemy attacks she had analyzed previously, the vulnerable points she had crawled through, the tempo of ambushes in Kabul's passages. She charted them all quietly in her thoughts. When they arrived at the outskirts, Steele's transmission crackled through the communication system. "Spectre Six, bring them in." Torres gestured her team ahead. They exited the vehicles, boots striking earth, weapons raised. The passages opened before them, dark and suffocating. A single animal barked distantly, then silence consumed the night again. The SEAL beside her whispered, "This feels like a setup." Torres offered no reply. Her hand lifted, signaling a stop. Her eyes swept the rooftops, the darkness, the broken windows that felt too still. She sensed it, the change in atmosphere, the pressure of observation. "Get ready," she stated quietly, her voice cutting through the radios with steady confidence. The Marines and SEALs positioned themselves, trusting her tone more than their own anxiety. And then, as if planned, the night erupted with violence. The opening crack of a weapon shattered the stillness. A soldier collapsed hard, his comrades pulling him behind protection, as rounds bounced off stone structures. Then came the gunfire burst from all directions, rooftops, windows, tight passages that channeled destruction into the convoy. Incoming, marksman left. Upper right, yelled a SEAL, his voice nearly buried by the thunder of automatic weapons. The Marines pressed into the earth, caught in the squeeze of Kabul streets. Haze and dust saturated the air, radios bursting with desperate transmissions. Every rooftop appeared to blaze with muzzle flashes. The sharp corners of the city turned hostile. Exposure everywhere. No escape. But Torres didn't surrender to the disorder. She pressed her spine against a demolished wall, her breathing level. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, interpreting it the way a navigator reads charts, angles, weaknesses, rhythm. There, a broken wall partially fallen. Sufficient handholds to scale. While others fired wildly, she moved. "Protect me," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like steel. Nobody challenged her. They simply adjusted fire, creating the opening she required. Torres rushed low, boots pounding against shattered stone. Then she ascended. One grip, then another, body flowing with calculated precision, despite rounds snapping close enough to rip the air around her. She reached the rooftop lip, rolled quietly over, and emerged behind the initial sniper position. Her weapon fired once, clean, precise, and the shooter fell before he could turn around. She didn't remain. She flowed to the following position, her shape disappearing into darkness, then materializing like vapor on the breeze. Each trigger pull eliminated another opponent. Systematic. Below, the Marines sensed the pressure change. Fire that had imprisoned them seconds before abruptly wavered. A SEAL looked upward, his eyes expanding. He glimpsed Torres, controlled, concentrated, attacking from elevation like the city itself had granted her access. "She's eliminating them," he whispered, almost in shock. One after another, the rooftops went silent under her accuracy. Escape paths opened like gates being unlocked. "Move! Push left," a Marine commanded, capturing the opportunity. The team advanced, carrying the injured, weapons covering gaps that had felt impossible to cross moments before. From elevation, Torres delivered controlled fire, each shot creating a corridor for her team. There was no disorder in her actions, no wasted ammunition. Every round represented freedom. Every round represented survival. When the final rooftop fell quiet, the convoy remained whole. Every Marine was breathing, wounded, shaken, but breathing. Torres descended, boots landing in the dust, her weapon still heated. She remained silent as she rejoined the team, slipping back into position as though she hadn't just altered the outcome of the battle single-handedly. The SEALs stared at her, the grins they'd displayed earlier, replaced by amazed silence. One finally muttered under his breath, "That's not speculation, that's reality." And in that instant, the story of Spectre 6 was no longer whispers. It was absolute fact. The vehicles returned to base beneath the faint glow of floodlights, dust still coating their uniforms, the scent of gunpowder clinging to their bodies. Medical staff hurried forward, treating the wounded. But what mattered above all was this: every Marine was breathing. Every soldier had emerged from the ambush, alive. Inside the command tent, the environment was transformed from before. The same SEALs who had mocked Torres now stood quietly along the perimeter, their expressions blank. The Marines who had questioned her moved with the stiffness, like soldiers standing before something greater than themselves. General Marcus Steele waited at the front of the table, arms folded, medals shining under the illumination. When Torres entered, boots striking the wooden surface, the room went silent. Nobody dared whisper this time. Steele observed her for an extended moment, his eyes hard but no longer doubtful. He'd witnessed enough to silence skepticism. When he spoke, the entire tent absorbed every word. "Spectre 6, he stated, the call sign leaving his mouth with purposeful gravity. "You kept every soldier alive today." He didn't deliver a speech. He didn't raise his volume. Instead, he offered her the smallest acknowledgement. And from someone like Steele, that was more than decorations, more than medals. It was honor carved from combat, and gained through sacrifice. The room froze. SEALs who valued themselves on being unshakable stood motionless. Marines who had dismissed her now stared as though afraid to interrupt the moment. For a heartbeat, it felt like time itself had paused. Torres didn't react. She didn't grin. She simply saluted, precise and firm. The general returned it sharp and brief. Nothing further required saying. That evening, news traveled faster than radio transmissions. Throughout Kabul, in dining halls, guard stations, and sleeping quarters, Marines whispered the identity with fresh certainty. Spectre Six wasn't speculation anymore. She was authentic. Young recruits, fresh from training, started carving S6 into their helmets, into weapon stocks, into scraps of paper folded into pockets like Lucky Charms. Veterans nodded quietly, sharing the account without embellishment this time. A soldier who had confronted rooftops alone and returned an entire team alive. In the stillness beyond the barracks, Torres sat on a sandbag barrier beneath the Kabul night sky. The stars stretched vast overhead, the same stars she had observed 1,000 nights previously. She ran a cloth across her weapon, the motion slow, almost meditative. She didn't enjoy the whispers. She didn't desire the myth. She only considered the soldiers, still breathing, because of what had occurred in those passages. Her voice was soft, intended only for herself and the stars. As long as they return home, she whispered, the identity is justified. The breeze carried her words into the darkness, and somewhere distant, the sound of laughter drifted from a barracks window. Marines breathing, because of her Spectre. Spectre 6 wasn't simply a call sign anymore. It was a heritage,